Year! May I be one of the first to wish you a very Happy New Year from the team here at SPSJ. This morning we've just got a short message because it is Sunday. If you're one of those people that has no idea what day it's been for the last week, this is your reminder that it is well and truly Sunday. But we just have a short message from our vicar, Andy Morgan, this morning, a special New Year's message. Instead of a longer service this morning. So I'm going to hand over to him. Hope you enjoy it and have a really good week. We'll see you next week.
Happy New Year, everyone. Can you believe it's 2022 already? Life just continues to be surreal, doesn't it, at the moment? Well, I wonder if you've made New Year's resolutions. I wonder if you've broken them already by the time you're watching this. I don't know. But I do hope that this year is a really good year for all of us. In the church year, what we're looking at today as SPSJ is we are looking at something called the Epiphany. Now, you may know this word epiphany as a kind of great revelation, which of course it is. But in the church, what we're specifically thinking about on the Epiphany today is we're thinking about Jesus revealing himself to the Gentiles in the form of the Magi, the three wise men, or the three kings. You probably know them from the songs and from the Christmas carol. And the Gentiles are essentially just people who weren't Jews, so people like you and me. So I hope that today's short New Year's message is really relevant for you, because it's all about how God reveals himself to us and what that means for us as we go about our lives today. So I'm going to get straight into it. We find this story in Matthew's Gospel, and it's chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. And it says this. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. We know some of this story, don't we, from that nativity scene that we get in schools. But actually what we see in this story is, and as you kind of follow it through and what happens next, we know that Jesus wasn't a baby anymore. He was perhaps certainly no more than 2 years old. He's probably around 1 when the Magi visit King Herod. One of the things I love about the Gospels is the historical detail that they contain. I mean, we know all about King Herod from outside of the Bible. He was this nasty man who was just obsessed with power and control. So much so that he even killed his own sons when he thought they were going to try and kick him off the throne. He's not a nice guy. And so we know that if he's that kind of person, that these Magi, they must have been pretty important themselves. We suspect, there's lots of people who spent over this last kind of 100 years who have spent ages trying to rationalize and understand this passage, because it is a bit weird. It doesn't fit with the rest of Matthew's gospel, if we're honest. But you know what? I don't want to try and do that today, because sometimes we just need to understand that God is capable of the miraculous, and we just need to take God's word for things sometimes. Who were these Magi then? Well, they were probably from the kind of Persian Empire somewhere out in the east, which was another important empire that used to kind of clash with Rome and would fight over who the best empire was. And these guys, they were probably kind of like, they weren't the kings, they weren't the authority, the rulers of the day. They were, in our understanding, we probably think them as like civil servants, something like that. They were the guys who sat underneath the king. They were the ones with the kind of the real authority and the power to make things happen, to be influencers. And these guys specifically seemed to be kind of looking for who they were the next king would be, that they could then influence. They were like kingmakers almost, is who these people were. And the way that they did that in those days was they would watch the stars. That's what they believed. And they see this star appear in the sky. If you watched my Christmas Day message, if you didn't, go back and watch it, but I was talking all about the light coming into the world. And how is one of the ways that God announces the light coming into the world? Well, he announces it by a light, by using a star to show where this light has been born. And so they follow it. They go to Jerusalem because they know that that's the center of Israel. They know that's where the king is. So they go to see the king to congratulate him, I assume, on the birth of a new baby. But of course, Jesus isn't there. And we get this narrative, and eventually they head off to Bethlehem. They find Jesus. They present their gifts, which we know all about. And I'm not going to go into the significance or unsignificance of what those gifts may have meant, because Matthew doesn't. But we know the story. The important thing for us now is, though, so what? What does this story mean for us today? What is it? So I started by saying that the Magi, they were non-Jews like you and me, if you're watching this. And it is all about Jesus revealing himself to the world. That's what this story is about. So what does it teach us? What does the example of these Magi, however many of them there were, because we don't know, what does their example teach us to do in this new year of 2022? Well, the first thing I think I'd like to say is that they're watching out for this star, weren't they? They were already observant. They were looking out for it. They were wanting to see it. What are we wanting to see this year? What are we looking out for? What signs are we wanting? What is it we're longing for? Great question to ask at the start of New Year. What do we want to see this year? And then if we think then we start to see that something kind of that happening, well, what's our reaction to it? For the Magi here, well, they're curious and they see the star and they have to go and search and find it. They've got to know exactly what it means and where it's happening. Are we like that? I mean, if you're not a Christian watching this, you wouldn't consider yourself a Christian, or you don't go to church, maybe for you, that starting point is just to kind of acknowledge God more. To just reach out and say, well, okay, I'm going to give this a bit of a go this year. I don't know what it's going to mean, but I'm going to look out for those God moments in my life. I'm going to be a bit more curious about it and try and find a bit more out about it. And I'm sure we'll be doing things as a church to kind of help you with that over this year. If you've been in church a long time, you consider yourself a Christian, well, for you, it may be thinking about God's kingdom. You know, we know God's kingdom still isn't here in all its fullness. We see on the news all the time the issues and the problems with life. So maybe for you, you just want to see more of God's kingdom this year, and looking out for those signs and being curious to go and search and find them. Well, what else do we know from the Magi? Well, they're determined. I mean, they go all the way to Jerusalem, travelling a great distance to get there. But then the baby's not there. They don't leave it there and go home and think, oh, well, we tried. No, they go and search for this one house in Bethlehem. One house where Jesus is lying. They search him out. They are determined. They are not going to give up. This year, I hope that will be the same for us. Let's not give up. Let's not just kind of worry about what winter will bring, but know that spring's coming and then the summer. Let's get through this whole year. Let's be determined this year to see God's kingdom come and to see just lives transformed and that light overcoming the darkness that we saw last year. And then the final thing that we see is just that the willingness of these Magi to just be open to what God is doing. not what they expect. They could easily have thought, well, that's nonsense. We've come to the king's temple, the king's palace. If the new king's not here, then where else could he be? But no, they go, they find that baby in a random house in Bethlehem. And they don't question it. They believe the sign. They are open to what God is doing. So for us at the start of this new year, I just hope that we will have this curiosity and be watching out for what we see God doing around us. And then we'll have a determination to want to join in with it, determined to see it through to the end, whatever that may be for each of us in our own path that God has called us to. And I pray that we'll just be open to God's way and just relinquish our own ways, our own thoughts, what we desire, put them aside, and let's turn fully to God this year.